Good afternoon. So, yes, I am Professor Aimee van Wynsberghe. I'm the Alexander von Humboldt Professor for the Applied Ethics of Artificial Intelligence. I'm Director of the Institute for Science and Ethics and founder of the Bonn Sustainable AI Lab. So I'm over on the Bonner Talweg 57. And yes, I have. So I'm hoping that my talk today will resonate with some of you. I already have some collaboration with Zeph, but I think I've been here for almost 3 years, and it's amazing to me how massive the university is. That there are so many different institutes and centers and departments and faculties and whatnot. So I think this is a great moment to at least tell you a bit about my work, and that myself and my team were always open to collaboration. So if you're interested, then please follow up with me afterwards. Okay, so today I'm going to give really a kind of a general overview on the research that I do as sort of an introduction to this is what's happening at another institute here at the university. Yeah. So I'll be talking about sustainable artificial intelligence, and this is within the field of AI ethics. But what I'm trying to do with my research and my research lab is to introduce this third wave of AI ethics, which I'll explain. So a little bit about me, just so you have an introduction to me. I have a background in cell biology, so I'm not a classically trained philosopher or ethicist. And while I was studying, I also come from Canada. And while I was studying cell biology, I worked at a robotics institute where we were training surgeons how to use surgical robots. So this is C-STAR, Canadian Surgical Technologies and Advanced Robotics. And it was this experience where I was kind of struck by the way that medical technologies were implemented and the way that they were developed, that we were really looking at the efficiency of the robot rather than the bigger picture, right? Rather than what was the nurse's perspective. How did the surgeon feel? Because they're now, I'm not sure if you're familiar with surgical robots, but the surgeon is in this console. Yeah, and they're performing the surgery like this, so they don't touch the patient at all. So I was curious about, what does this mean for the surgeon's experience? And it was this experience then that led me to look into ethics, ethics of technology. How do we evaluate technology? How do we design technology? So then I went on through my academic career and also began working with NGOs and with policymakers. So I was a member of the European Commission High Level Expert Group on Artificial Intelligence. And this was the precursor to the regulation that will be established here in Europe on artificial intelligence. And then coming here to Bonn as one of the Alexander von Humboldt professors, I shifted my research from the more traditional AI ethics issues to then broaden the perspective of AI ethics to look at environmental justice issues. And so, in each of these contexts, whether it's in academia, policymaking, industry, I've also worked in industry, I take a particular perspective or vision on what an ethicist is meant to be or meant to do. And I refer to this as the ethicist as a designer, so that the ethicist becomes a part of the design team of new technologies. And the reason why I try to emphasize this is because for the most part, ethics is usually considered an add-on at the end. Yeah, you create, and we see this a lot with artificial intelligence, you create the algorithms, you develop these models, and then afterwards you think, oops, privacy, right? Oops, transparency, fairness. So the ethical issues come at the end. And then we have these stereotypes where the ethicists are the ones who come into the room and they're like, no, you can't do that. You can't do that. So there's this, tension where many developers think that ethics stifles innovation. But what I'm trying to do is that ethics can actually be a part of the innovation process if we start to understand the ethicists as a part of the design team. So now getting into the content of my talk, I thought I would just briefly begin with what is ethics in general. And yeah, I could spend the rest of the day talking about this, but I won't. But just so that we're all on the same page. Yeah. So depending on who you ask, you'll have different answers to the question, what is ethics? Some people focus on, character traits of an individual, virtue ethics. How does one develop the virtues to become a good person? Others will talk about theories of right actions, right? It's the consequences of your action that determines whether or not it was good or bad or right or wrong, or whether or not you follow certain principles and duties. But the vision of ethics that I like to use in my work is an Aristotelian vision. And this is the idea that ethics is the study of the good life, what it is and how we can achieve it. And then we use the language of values to talk about the good life, right? And so then if we can achieve values like fairness, privacy, dignity, sustainability, then we come closer to being able to achieve the good life on an individual level and on a societal level. Okay. So then, with that understanding, the ethics of artificial intelligence is, in what I suggest it is what is the impact of the design, the development, the usage, and the scaling up of artificial intelligence on our ability to live a good life? And so then looking at it in sort of like a linear way, how does AI impact these values? And then the impact on the values resembles or has an impact on our ability to achieve the good life. So super, super general, but I hope it'll become clear as I go through the rest of my talk. Also, let me know if I'm speaking too quickly. Am I speaking too fast? Because I've had way too much coffee today. Okay. Stays. Okay. So then what I also want to do is to give you some background information on this space of AI ethics. Yeah, that it's this massive field. There are so many different ethical issues. There are so many different values and ways that AI impacts these values, sometimes promoting the values, allowing for greater efficiency in a company, for example, allowing us to predict consequences related to climate change, resource distribution, biodiversity. So there could be positive impacts on the values, and there could be negative impacts on the values. And I like to also discuss different trends in the AI ethics field, and I call them waves of AI ethics. And so the first wave that I suggest is the ethics of superintelligence, of artificial general intelligence. And within this wave, then we had, Stephen Hawking almost 10 years ago was talking about how AI was going to end mankind, right? AI, or we have the Terminator scenario. This is often invoked in the media that AI is going to rise up and just kill everyone. Yeah. And so there's these very like doomsday scenario. We also have a revival of this kind of thing. There's been many statements now talking with generative AI about how AI poses the biggest threat to extinction of humanity. So there's a certain sort of category of ethical issues related to a technology that doesn't exist. So we don't have super intelligence yet, and we might not ever have it. Yeah. But the ethical issues are related to this future technology. They're very broad, very general, and they are dystopian. AI is just going to wipe us all out. This is what I would classify as the first wave of AI ethics. Then as a reaction to that, once ethicists started to understand that this technology isn't necessarily this future super intelligence, but we use it regularly. I don't have my phone, but we all carry AI around with us on our phones, unless you have one of the flip phones, yay, good for you if you do have that. I'd love it if I could do that. Anyway, so we had ethicists who were then understanding that AI is very much a part of our day-to-day lives and that there are ethical issues related to very specific applications. And is there a way that we can design it differently? Okay. And so then what I mean by this is we saw many examples. So, for example, the self-driving Uber that killed a pedestrian. And this raised the question of responsibility and how AI was impacting our concept of responsibility. And again, think about, right? Good life, values. Yeah. We need security when it comes to who is responsible if somebody dies or who is liable if somebody dies during an interaction with a technology. Yeah, that's how we feel. We have a sense of security and safety about the country or the city that we live in. And when this accident happened, it was fascinating to see how no one wanted to take responsibility. And it was unclear who or what would be responsible. The company said, well, the driver is responsible, obviously. And then, the driver was thinking it's a self-driving car, right? The whole point of it is that there's meant to not be a driver. So how could the driver be responsible? And then they went to, the developers must be responsible, right? The computer engineer, the computer programmer. And they said, it's impossible for us to predict every single scenario that the car will engage in. That's why it's machine learning. Yeah, it learns as it develops. So the developer can't be responsible. And the company certainly didn't want to be liable. So then we're in this interesting situation. Who is responsible? So this technology was challenging our foundations of the good life. Now, to get into more specific examples and to also show there's so many things to talk about, but I thought I would cluster them. There are ethical issues related to AI and data, and many, many, many issues. But if we think before we've even gotten to the stage where we are training the AI, we have different issues related to moments in the life cycle of the data collection. We learned through the Cambridge Analytica Facebook scandal about how data is sourced, right? The creation of a fake survey to generate information on individuals. Then this is used to target them for political advertising. So ethical issues about how you actually go about extracting or getting data from someone. That's different from the collection. That's the creation, making somebody answer something, and the answers are going to be used for something entirely different. There's the intuition of deceit there. Yeah. So data sourcing, then data collection. Are you familiar with Clearview? That company? Yeah. So they scrape the internet for pictures with faces, and then they use all of these pictures. So Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. I'm not like hip anymore, so I don't know what else is out there. TikTok. Yeah. I've heard my kids say that. Yeah. But scraping different social media sites to obtain images of faces and then using that to train an algorithm to be able to recognize faces, right? So aside from the problems with what kinds of images were obtained, is it okay to collect data in that way? We refer to that as a secondary usage, a lack of informed consent. The people whose images were taken did not know that they were taken and did not give consent for this. Right. So then we have, that's another set of ethical issues just related to how the data is collected. We're still not even at the training data stage. As we get closer to the training data stage, then we think about how the data is labeled. And so if we're creating a machine learning algorithm for image recognition, for example, you need, depending on the methodology that you're using, you would need to be able to identify in a picture, this is a cat versus this is an ice cream cone. Yeah. And you need people oftentimes to label what the things are in an image in order for the training to occur. But this can be very expensive, right? So now we see instances where they are using prisoners in prisons to do the labeling because it's free labor. They use refugees in refugee camps to do the labeling. And they've created massive data labeling farms, they call them, on other continents where people are working for, $1.50 or €1.50 or something like that a day. And so it's almost reminiscent of the clothing cycle. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Where we had, children and these slave-like labor conditions for people who were involved in the clothing industry so that we could have cheap clothes. Yeah. So we're seeing a kind of a repeat that's happening in the AI space. Then we get to, once the data has been labeled, then we look at what happens when we're training an algorithm. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the saying garbage in, garbage out. Okay. So, but this is the idea that, we often hear in the media that the AI is biased. Yeah, or the AI has biases, but that's not the correct terminology. We have biases within society. We have discrimination that happens within society. And this is reflected in the data that we have. And this is what is used to train the algorithm. And so then these biases are exacerbated sometimes, or they are prevalent. They are present in the output that we see coming from an AI. So the garbage that we have within society, that's not a very nice thing to say, but the biases and the discrimination that we have in society are unfortunately replicated and exacerbated when we're using AI. This is another problem related to the data. Another set of issues has to do with privacy. And so, and this gets into, when I'm talking about the values and the impact that the technology has on the values, AI is changing our concept of privacy. When we bring AI into our home, this was traditionally a private space, and it has now become somewhat of a public space, right? Because we have stories about how the AI is always on, is always listening. So what is AI doing to our understanding of the concept of privacy? Or disclosure of new kinds of information. Now, this can be positive or this can be negative. AI can be used to make a prediction about an individual. And this can be positive in the sense that if somebody is coming from a country where they don't have credit scores, then they don't have the possibility to be a full member of society if they're moving to a country where a credit score is necessary. Yeah. So they could use something like search history to create a kind of credit score. Um, and then allow them to become a fuller member of society in this way. But on the flip side, this can also be used in a negative way, that you have companies that are using this possibility of predicting about individuals in less than ethical ways, I guess we would say. That a company can scan all of the emails that are sent by an individual, and this can be used to predict whether or not the individual is thinking about quitting, for example. And then what does the company do with this information? Do they want to fire the person before they quit? Or predicting suicide? Right. There's also certain algorithms that are used to read the text, read tweets, read things like that to predict whether or not an individual is suffering from a mental disorder and might be on the verge of committing suicide. So, so it can go, what I mean to say here is that it can go both ways, this idea of disclosing new kinds of information. And excuse me, how do you give consent for this? Right? The developers don't even know exactly what kinds of information they could reveal about an individual. And so should we be in a position where we say, yes, you can use my data for this, when we don't even know what could be the outcome of it? So it then challenges our concept of consent as well as informed consent, because oftentimes in the negative scenarios I presented, nobody is asked whether or not their emails can be read. AI and transparency. So it's important to also, how familiar are you with AI? I realize I'm talking about AI ethics, but do you work with AI, with artificial intelligence? Maybe some of you no. So important to see it. AI is this umbrella term, artificial intelligence, and it's the idea of wanting to create a system that resembles human intelligence in a certain way. Maybe that's making a prediction. Maybe that's understanding patterns in data, in language, for example. And then there's different ways of achieving this simulated, this artificial intelligence. You have good old-fashioned AI, symbolic reasoning, machine learning, neural networks, deep learning, yeah? And within these different methodologies, there are different concerns, of course, that are raised. So with the older methods, like good old-fashioned AI or symbolic reasoning, it was clear what the rules were to develop the model. So if you wanted to teach a model to be able to make a certain prediction, you gave limits to the model, and these were understood and known by the developers. With machine learning, and this is now people mostly equate machine learning with AI, but with machine learning, it introduced this new problem, this new conundrum, that the whole point is that the AI can learn something beyond what we know, beyond what we understand. So it can make predictions that we don't even know are possible. But that means in order for that to happen, that we don't set the boundaries. We don't give the rules. We don't say this is a cat, this is a dog. We want the machine learning algorithm to learn that itself. But this means that the developers often don't know or understand the rules. And this is where the conversation comes in about the black box of the technology, that you have inputs, something happens, and you have an output. And one of the first examples where we learned about this was when there was a company training an algorithm to predict or to recognize a wolf versus a dog. And so they trained the model with the data that they had. This is machine learning, so they didn't give it rules. Then they gave it a new set of data, and they found that it was actually pretty good at predicting, at being able to identify whether or not the image was a wolf or a dog. But then they did some reverse engineering, right? So they were trying to, this is when we talk about explainable AI. They were trying to get the system to explain what pixels, what part of the picture it used to make its prediction that it was a wolf or a dog. And they found out that snow was the important factor. So in all of the pictures where there was a wolf, there was snow in the picture. And in the pictures where there was a dog, there was oftentimes not snow. And so, I mean, it seems like it's like, that's really interesting. Hadn't thought about that. But then when you get into more serious examples, like that's funny. But then you get into a situation where you have, the cartoon is also meant to be funny. But if you think about it for a second, we could have a situation where we have these autonomous cars. We don't know how a decision was arrived at. And going back to what I talked about with the garbage in, garbage out, and the prevalence or the problem of discrimination and biases in our society, that's the data that's used to train the algorithm. We don't know what the rules are that are used to generate an output. And then we have a situation where, when it's used in predictive policing, for example, it's already shown that people of lower socioeconomic status or people of a certain color or culture, they are more often thought to maybe commit a crime in the future, or their neighborhoods are policed more heavily because the algorithm is predicting that there could be a crime in this neighborhood, or that that person could commit a crime. So this becomes incredibly problematic. This problem of where the data is coming from, or the fact that we're replicating these biases and then not even knowing, what is essentially happening. Okay, so now getting to, I know I'm throwing so much information at you, but getting to the sustainable AI part. What I found in my research so I was most often doing research in the second wave of AI ethics, looking at specific applications and raising these issues. What is the problem when you have the biases and the lack of transparency in the algorithm? You put these together and you have a problem. But I found that in recent years, I was struck by this idea that whoever did the marketing is a genius. But when you hear cloud, the cloud, it's on the cloud, yeah, or AI, what is it? It feels intangible. It feels like not of this planet, that there is no physical infrastructure. But there actually is a massive physical infrastructure that isn't taken into account. And so what I am suggesting with my research is that, yes, all of the ethical issues that I just laid out are very important, but there's another set of environmental justice issues that have not been addressed. And that it requires a more structuralist approach. So rather than looking at an application, a design problem, looking at AI, like this massive, massive thing of AI. So I'm introducing sustainable artificial intelligence, and this idea of bringing sustainability into AI, exploring what sustainability means in the context of AI. And with sustainability, you often have the connotation of maintaining. And what I want to show is that this infrastructure of AI, this massive thing that AI is broken in a metaphorical sense, and we need to repair. We need to repair the environmental justices that I will raise. So it's not, when I say sustainable AI, it's not just how do we keep this cycle going of exploitation. It's how do we understand this vicious cycle and decide what needs to be sustained or maintained and what needs to be repaired and rethought. So I suggest that sustainable AI is a movement to foster change in the entire life cycle of AI products towards greater ecological integrity and social justice. And so I emphasize the entire life cycle of the AI product, going back to the idea. Remember when I was talking about how ethics is often this afterthought, this thing that comes after. And when we look at the environmental justice issues that I put on the table here, or that I'm trying to uncover and raise awareness about, we can see that we have to have this discussion and this mentality of sustainability before we even start collecting data, right? At the very, very beginning. How do we structure this infrastructure of AI so that we don't maintain the exploitation of people and planet. Then another part of this field of sustainable AI is I've suggested that there's these two branches. There's AI for sustainability, and this is massive. This is, using AI to achieve the sustainable development goals and things like that. And then there's this sustainability of AI. And it might seem like a no-brainer, like, oh yeah, I mean, of course, but nobody was paying attention to the sustainability of AI. And you have this massive movement. I mean, almost every big tech company, go to Facebook, Google, Amazon, they all have this like AI for social good, AI for the planet, AI. And it's almost like ethics washing. It's almost like a lip service. We can focus on how we're using AI to do these things. And then, we don't have to pay attention to the other stuff. And so what I'm trying to say is sometimes I even go as far as to say, if you don't focus on the sustainability of issues, there's no way of achieving AI for sustainability. These two things need to come together, which companies do not like to hear, by the way. Okay, so then so just repeating what I had said before, there is this massive growing effort to talk about using AI for good. And then I'm trying to push back on this and say, I mean, of course, we want to use the technology for good, but we have to understand the complexity of what that means. And also using an unsustainable technology to achieve sustainable development goals seems counterintuitive. No, it seems like a bit of an oxymoron, cognitive dissonance. Let's use something that's going to make the climate crisis worse to solve the climate crisis. You know what I mean? Like what? Okay, so then giving you some more examples of what I'm talking about, and I am watching my time, so I know I'm getting there. Giving some more examples of what am I talking about when I raise environmental justice issues. I'll just point out a couple here in terms of ecological footprint, and the first one is carbon emissions. So when you do this training, you require energy to do the training, and there's often carbon emissions as a result of this of using the energy. And of course, it depends on what type of energy you're using, renewables versus fossil fuels. But traditionally, it's been fossil fuels. And one of the first studies that was done, which kind of like struck a chord or spurred up this whole carbon emissions debate, showed that training one natural language processing model on one computer, one GPU, resulted in 600,000 pounds of carbon dioxide, which was the equivalent of the carbon emissions of 5 cars over the lifetime of the car. Yeah, so the car driving every day for 5 years. The training of using one GPU, one algorithm. And this is, if you have a scale of how many GPUs are necessary, how long they're running, how often they get retrained, because you can't just train an algorithm once. You have to retrain it if you have a new data set or if you have an update. This 600,000 pounds of carbon dioxide isn't even on the same scale if we're talking about Chat GPT-3, for example. So I've been in many interviews where the press will say, "Oh, Aimee, it's just 5 cars. Like that's not the end of the world." But when I started to talk about the infrastructure of AI, it's not just one algorithm here and there, right? We're talking about an incredible number of algorithms, an incredible number of GPUs, data centers that are a part of this technology. So then we're talking about millions of cars being on the road. And at a time when we need to reduce carbon emissions, it seems counterintuitive that we're increasing carbon emissions through the training and the usage of AI. Another ecological footprint to mention is the mining of precious minerals. And so again, going back to this idea that there is a physical infrastructure to AI, right? It's not in the clouds. It's on the planet. And you need, in order for this physical infrastructure to function, you need precious minerals. you need gold, you need lithium, you need so many minerals. And often these minerals are coming from mines outside of our continent, and the mining conditions are awful. And now they've started to. Do you remember blood diamond? You remember? Yeah. So now they refer to the mine, the minerals, as blood minerals, because we're seeing ourselves again repeating history and exploiting people in order for us to have our cheap AI systems on our phone, or for us to have Chat GPT-3 and convert our CV into a poem and that kind of thing. So the mining conditions is one thing, how we are exploiting people, but then you also think about the surrounding communities. So I have researchers from Ghana on my team, and one of them is specifically doing research into the future of mining in Ghana, because most gold is coming from Ghana, and he talks about the mining communities and what the impact of mining does to the community in terms of changing the soil and toxicity levels of the water. And then I have another researcher from Ghana, and she's looking at how women are particularly impacted by this. So for the mining community, if your water is um, less than ideal, the women are the one who have to walk further to go get clean water, right? Or if they cannot create a small plot of agriculture, they're the ones who have to figure it out. So I say this also to highlight or to point out that when we have this field of sustainable AI, or when we have our focus on environmental justice issues, it opens our eyes to hidden demographics that we hadn't been thinking about. And so in the second wave of AI ethics, we're focused on, privacy. Are you collecting my data? That's almost a luxury ethical concern when you look at the other ethical concerns related to the environmental issues. So the last ecological footprint that I'll raise is electronic waste. And so again, reinforcing this idea that there is a physical infrastructure to artificial intelligence, now we talk about you need the latest GPUs the latest computers and servers and software and whatnot every 6 months between 2 years. That's when you need to be renewing them or replacing them. Sorry. And with that replacement, you have to do something with the old ones, right? And I mean, I imagine I don't have to explain to this group that electronic waste is often not kept on the continent where it's been used. And again, we have a situation where we are increasing or introducing toxicity into communities outside of our own. And so the toxins from the electronic waste go into the soil, impacting the physical health of the communities around the mountains of electronic waste, and then again impacting their ability to provide for themselves in terms of clean drinking water, or when the soil is contaminated, what do you do about growing food? Yeah. So again, reinforcing this idea that there are hidden demographics, people whose voices are not heard, who are being exploited for AI to be available in the US, in Europe, in China, in Russia, and whatnot. And then this is, I haven't even got into the use of water or the use of land. And water in particular in Taiwan, the leading producer, I think it's more than 50% of the chips are made. Again, another necessary piece for the physical infrastructure of AI. More than 50% of chips come from Taiwan, and you need to have the cleanest possible water in order to clean the chips. And so now Taiwan is in a situation where they need to purchase water from other countries for the citizens to drink, because they use the water for cleaning the microprocessors, the chips. Yeah. And so it goes, it goes on and on. I could do more examples, but I am watching my time. So why care about the sustainability of AI? I hope that I just answered that in the previous slides, but then just to sort of reiterate, as I said before, it's not just Google, Amazon, Facebook, it's not just these these select companies, we see new companies popping up daily. The billions that governments are directing towards the development of AI on a federal level, on a national level, it's growing. It's not something that we're going to be saying goodbye to. Not only that, but another argument that I've been trying to make in my research is that AI both relies on existing infrastructure. So you need the water supply from a city, and then of course you direct the water supply towards cooling the servers. But you need public infrastructures that are already established in order to develop AI. But not only that, now most companies use AI uh, as their business model. Yeah, they use AI is their business. So AI is becoming its own infrastructure. Yeah, that it's not just relying on what we already have in society, but you think of I think it was a year and a half ago in the summer, Facebook crashed for a day. And there were so many companies that couldn't function, companies often in the global south that couldn't function because they needed the platform, the AI platform, in order for their company to work. So yeah, with that, again, I'm trying to invoke this idea that it's not just one algorithm here and there. It's not just the problem of predictive policing or using AI in recruitment of individuals for jobs. It is this massive problem of just AI in general, and that the technology is growing and our investment in the technology is growing. And then all of this to also say, and again, this isn't the audience that I need to remind, but that we are in a global climate crisis. And so, talking about these two branches that I had, and this in sustainable AI, the of sustainability of, and the sustain AI for sustainability, and that you have all of these companies pushing towards, AI for sustainability, that at a time, at the moment where we are at, where this is code red for humanity, it seems impossible that we would move forward with this technology without bringing the two branches together. And that what I think this means is not just a focus on carbon emissions, not just looking at the energy consumption. Of course, this is relevant, but when you really get deep into it and you understand where the minerals are coming from, you understand what decisions are being made for the drinking water on different countries, then we need to rethink this whole plan of AI before we push forward with the infrastructure in the way that we have been doing. Okay, so just to recap, the main thrust of my argument. So I started out, talking about giving an overview of AI ethics and how there are so many different ethical considerations. But then what I really wanted to emphasize, and I hope I did, is that AI development and use causes environmental damage, and that it's time for us to now prioritize and focus on what is this environmental. What are the environmental consequences? And that when we do that, when that becomes the glasses that we put on to then look at what are the ethical issues, then our eyes are opened to continents, to demographics that are not being heard or paid attention to when we talk about AI in Europe or AI in Germany. So I'm saying our sustainable AI glasses are necessary and should be this new era of AI ethics. And that's so right now, I think it's very promising that we have regulation coming forward. And even just this week, we had many countries gathered in the UK talking about regulation. So the US is now stepping up, and they're approaching regulation as well. Europe has been the front runner. Canada, Brazil, China has even come out with AI regulation. But what I still find is there's a lack of attention to are the environmental consequences. That really the focus is on privacy and fairness. And I'm not saying we should disregard that, but it is time now for our governance mechanisms to include attention to and requirements for trying to repair this broken or vicious cycle of AI that I was talking about. Okay, so I went a little bit over my time. Sorry for that, and thanks for letting me sit down. It was one of those days, and yeah, that's it for me. I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.